Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.14 mid lane tier list, so for Java content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There have been a decent amount of changes towards mid lane this patch. Obviously, we have seen the takeover of AD mid laners in competitive. That's kind of bled through into both high elo and to a degree mid and low elo solo queue. It doesn't really translate well in terms of win rate and power. Oftentimes, the dynamic between competitive and the average solo queue game is very different. Game length, jungle picks like synergies, the reasoning for playing these champions all kind of alters, and I kind of want to discuss it this patch. Alongside that, obviously we've had the release of Aurora. She is played both top and mid. Very interesting champion, and I will cover her when I get to her. But to begin with, we're going to start in the D tier. So the D tier champions are going to be Caitlyn. Caitlyn has picked up a bit of play rate, obviously with the AD mids being played a bit more. She has gained a bit of traction here. Not doing particularly well. She's probably one of the weakest of the options. I'd even recommend the likes of Sivir over her. Sivir is something which Chovy has played, I believe, as this is targeted towards average solo queue. Not something I'd really recommend. AD mid laners, the marksmen tend to be better performant in high and elite, where they can utilize the kits more effectively and their ability to punish lanes a lot more heavily. Alongside her, we have Lucian and Ezreal. Both these champions kind of follow similar problems as Caitlyn, except when they have better solo lane tendencies or kits. In Lucian's case, obviously his dash, his high early game damage, his more spellcasty playstyle definitely allows for a better time. In Ezreal's case, he's probably the best of the three, just not something I'd recommend as much unless you put a lot of games into Ezreal. Can translate into something in the mid lane. His kit definitely has the strongest capability here. He is being nerfed in 14.15, but if you do feel comfortable in the pick, then it is definitely something you could have access to, especially if you're pairing it alongside an AP jungler, even though a lot of those have been nerfed at this point, which is the original reason of why a lot of these AD picks came to prominence, alongside other systems, of course. Corki got nerfed this patch, still gonna stay in the D tier. I had him in the D tier last patch. I believe this champion was already incredibly elite and competitive bound. Now it's even more obvious. The 30 health loss has definitely made him a lot more punishable. He was already pretty bound to his early game, and yeah, being more punishable has definitely hurt him here. As been a while of just being bound to competitive. This pick has obviously had its health regen nerfed a continuous amount as well, making him considerably less forgiving to play, alongside Fleet obviously being nerfed a bit in terms of its sustain. And then continuously it's going to be nerfed into 14.15. So he'll take a bit of a tag there. He's going to also stay within my D tier. Moving on to the C tier. So we're going to start with Smolder. He got buffed this patch. He moves from the D tier to the C tier. I believe he has better properties for a mid laner. His scaling can also help him a bit more here. Just for the average game, I believe he's less competitively viable as a mid laner, but just as a general pick, definitely has some level of synergy here. Can opt into some more bruisery variants. Your Trinity, your Manamune, your Shojin, all these items are quite nice on him. Here's a solid C tier pick. Kai'Sa, also going to be in the C tier. Her artillery build tends to be a bit more high elo and competitive bound. Obviously, if you're able to continuously rotate Ws and you're playing against the correct comps, then it can be quite powerful and very oppressive to play against. In solo queue, you tend to see a bit more of the static Shiv and then like the hybrid AP variants, which aren't as consistent. Well, they are more consistent in some means, but then less. You're reliant on being a bit more close range, so they're not able to be played in as many circumstances. I believe this pick tends to be a bit weaker for the average player as well, so she is going to remain in my C tier. Katarina, underperforming for a bit. Her AD builds look to be a bit more preferable. Obviously, Katarina is primarily just played by OTPs. The champion outside of that just isn't really seeing that many games. Something I'd recommend avoiding unless you're willing to sink a lot of time into the champion, in which case you can kind of learn how to play the map, as she tends to play it a bit more differently to standard champions. Kassadin got nerfed, I believe, at the end of last split. He was overperforming for a while. Now he's kind of underperforming. For a scaling pick, he should definitely be performing a lot better for the average player, so he is going to remain within my C tier. Kiana, very elite skewed pick. kind of akin to Rengar, except for more mid lane. Rengar, obviously, more in the jungle. Top lane Rengar, not as elite skewed, but you get the idea. Kiana, going to stay with my C tier. The higher up you go, the more time you put in, the more you will be rewarded on this champion. Rise, also going to be with my C tier. I don't believe this champion's bad by any means. He just isn't as good as some of the other picks, which have like been propelled within the current climate, and he's definitely struggling a lot more. He doesn't really have access to his tanky builds, which he once did. He's more bound to his AP heavy builds, which definitely output a lot more damage, but leave him a bit more vulnerable without the likes of Everfrost, which he had in the past. Zoe, very high elo, Eastern bound champion. I think that's the best way of describing her. She is very prominent within China. She finds a lot of success there and a lot of ban rate. In the West, just not really finding that same level of success. For the average player, she's an okay pick if you're able to snowball throughout the game, but not something I would really recommend unless you've already put a lot of time into playing the champion. Moving down someone from the A tier, Tristana is going to land within my C tier. She's been nerfed pretty heavily this patch. Originally, the nerfs on paper weren't too bad, but then Riot really took a bigger swing. They went after the attack speed on the Q alongside not giving her as much base mana as she was originally perceived to get. She was going to get 350 from 250. She's now been given 300. Alongside that, the mana cost on Q has gone up to 50. The attack speed has gone down 15% flat at all ranks, and the W has had its mana cost go down from 60 to 50. Overall, these are a very big net nerf. They make her a lot more punishing within the mid lane, especially if you're not managing your mana correctly. Can be quite a different experience playing Tristana this patch compared to last patch. And now I'm going to drop her from the A tier down to the C tier. Moving on to the B tier. So moving up from the C tier, we have Hui and we have Zed. Hui, I kind of undervalued after his nerfs. He probably deserves more of a spot within the beta, but as people are still learning the champion, he's still a relatively new champion. His win rate does increase larger amounts than other champions patch by patch. This is through people just learning how to play the pick better, and he's going to move up from the C tier to the B tier. In Zed's case, the buffs this patch really did help him quite a bit. It made his laning phase a lot easier to play. Not the easiest, obviously. The champ still requires quite a lot of skill to pilot. His ban rate, obviously, has also shot up. Zed being stronger definitely does attribute to this. And he moves up from the C tier to the B tier. A couple of other champions being added here. So Aurora is going to land with my B tier. She is gaining a decent amount patch by patch, but it is beginning to kind of not be the same level as it was early on to this patch when she got released. There are lots of build variations going around. Within the top lane, we've obviously seen some like level of Lichbane, Swifty's Cosmic builds. Other than that, we've seen like Roa variations in mid lane. We've seen Luden's variations within mid lane. We've seen Malignant's variations within mid lane. The two underperforming ones look to be Liandry and Blackfire, so I'd recommend kind of moving off those and onto the other options. And then build-wise, Rabadon's looks to be pretty successful, while I isn't finding the same level of success as some of the other options. She, if you put the time in, will definitely climb up quite easily. She's probably overpowered for elite players who have really put the games into playing the pick. But for the average player, I'm going to rate her within the B tier. She is being nerfed quite heavily next patch in 14.15. Obviously, this is to account for the win rate gain over this current patch. And yeah, for the moment, I'm going to leave her within the B tier. Moving on from these three champions, we're going to have Kali. She's doing not as well after the E nerfs. Obviously, it was quite a lot of power to lose, but she's getting buffed in 14.15, getting a lot more power within that ultimate early on into the game, combined with some level of Shroud buff later on, which doesn't really do a huge amount. She will definitely probably jump from B tier to A tier, I imagine, but for the moment, she's going to linger within my B tier. Yasuo is also getting buffed in 14.15, but for the moment, he's also going to stay within my B tier. LeBlanc, a very, very strong elite skewed pick, probably close to the S plus tier within elite. For the average player, she does fall down a bit, obviously very reliant on mechanics, on snowballing. If you're not CSing well, you'll also get punished on this pick. She's not particularly forgiving to CS with, although she is a bit more forgiving than she used to be, now having that cooldown and mana refund on Q, I believe. I'm getting confused between Annie slightly, but there is a level of failsafe on that Q. I believe it's also damage amp to minions, if I remember correctly. But yeah, she's not as forgiving as she used to be. She's definitely better for the average player. Like, this is one of the best cases she's been in a while. And yeah, decent B tier pick. If you can snowball on this champion, she can be very oppressive, very strong. Definitely get good amounts of LP out of this champion. Oriana got buffed in 14.13, I believe. She got a base AD buff of 4, which is really nice for trading. Definitely more of an elite skewed buff. For the average player, she doesn't tend to be as consistent. She kind of follows a similar trend to LeBlanc, but has utility aspects rather than being as much of a burst mage. But she lingers within the B tier for the moment. Jace got buffed this patch. He probably goes from a low B tier pick to a high B tier pick. Also, a pretty elite skewed champion. A lot of these mid laners, which kind of linger B, C tier, are intentionally here for the average player. But then, if you go and look at like high elo tier lists, it will definitely be towards the top end. I'm not really accounting for that though. My tier list obviously very much directed towards mid elo and the average player. And Jace is going to sit within the B tier, but he's definitely in a good spot compared to some of the AD champions which have been nerfed. So I would recommend playing him if you really do enjoy playing Jace and you're pretty good at the pick. Ziggs, solid artillery mage, not quite as good as Xerath, which is my recommended go-to at the moment, but definitely has a level of strengths. If you want to watch anyone play Ziggs, I'd recommend APA. He is very good at the champion, and definitely something you can learn from. Talon is getting buffed in 14.15, very slightly. It's like a Q quality of life change, another one, I believe. But he got buffed in 14.12, and he's definitely been benefiting from that. AD Assassins in the mid lane aren't doing as well as they probably should be, which is why they've been buffing them up over time, and he has definitely benefited from that, so he has gone up. He is currently sat within my beta, but definitely an elite. He's got really strong kill thresholds and really powerful spikes, which you can abuse if you learn the champion, and he can definitely rise up to like the S tier. Malphite primarily just comes in as a counter pick. I wouldn't really recommend playing AP Malphite. Like, AP Malphite probably falls closer down to the C, D tier. It's not, it's very reliant on just being able to burst the target down and, like, almost the enemy having a lack of understanding. Tank Malphite is a good counter pick option, especially into heavy AD compositions, where you can get, like, a lot of value out of the pick. If you pick him in those situations, he can definitely rise up the tier list. He's relatively easy to play. You can run the likes of Arcane Comet and just be Q spam throughout the laning phase. Very hard to play against for a lot of champions which don't have a level of lifesteal or omnivamp. He's a solid B tier pick. Syndra, also very solid elite skewed champion, very strong burst mage if you get the items and you're CSing correctly, getting the splinters, making sure you're comboing to build that up, build up your passive, and just get progressively more powerful throughout the game. For the moment though, she is going to remain in my B tier. Vladimir, definitely benefiting from the buffs he received towards his W. He is going to get buffed pretty heavily in 14.15. Like, if you want to learn Vladimir at any time, learning him this patch into next patch, where we're going to see buffs towards Storm Surge, Cosmic Drive, and Rocket Belt, should be really big for him. Void Staff also being buffed, also a really nice item if you are opting into it. Of course, Crypt Bloom is also pretty good on this champion, if you do value haste quite a bit. But yeah, Vladimir should be in a really good spot next patch. For the moment though, he is going to be within my B tier. Yone getting buffed in 14.15 as well. They are doing a plethora of changes to some of the elite skewed champions, which are kind of to a degree underperforming. He is going to benefit from this, and yeah, he will move up from my B tier most likely, but for the moment he is going to stay here. Twisted Fate got nerfed because of his AD build, and to a degree they nerfed some of his AP ratios, as he was really, as a lot of them were really aggressive. His W had some sort of abhorrent blue card AP ratio, which has been tagged down a bit. He's a bit weaker now. He sits within the B tier. Of course, you still really value items like Lich Bane. It's really nice on him. Really amps up your damage on your gold card, on just cards generalistically. That combined with some of the items, some of the other items, RFC, he's fine. If you can play it at the pick well, you can definitely be rewarded. Ari, also going to move on my B tier. She was overperforming quite a bit. She now no longer is in that state. They did nerf her a bit, combined with some of her items, and she sits within the B tier. Talia also got nerfed, primarily for jungle, but mid lane, it tends to be a bit more elite skewed. She now drops down to the B tier. that is kind of where she lies. There are different build variations, but you do kind of rely on a mana option, so you can kind of get through laning phase as your mana costs tend to be pretty steep. Whether this is Luden's or the Blackfire Torch, it really depends on what you need within the game. She tends to be pretty good at using Blackfire Torch, but Luden's still a solid option if you're looking for a bit of burst. Moving on to the A tier, so we have a lot of champions here. Nasus is going to lead us off. Nasus is in a really good spot at the moment, really good counter option, especially with the likes of Swifties being nerfed. He will feel the Lucid's nerf, but that boot does counter him pretty heavily with a very important tool for allowing chase, combined with the fact that this champion got buffed in 14.12, if I remember correctly. He has definitely been doing a bit better. Desperate Nasus, I believe that's his name, is probably the best Nasus mid player to watch. He also plays Kale, if that is something you're also interested in. Kale mid doesn't really see as much play at the moment. It's not bad by any means. There are viable Kale builds, both AP and AD, but Nasus in a strong spot at the moment. Solid A tier pick. Lissandra got buffed in 14.12. The W cooldown went down, combined with, I believe, a Q damage buff, if I remember correctly. Q AP ratio buff. The pick is doing a bit better with that. Definitely more utilized as a counter option. If you can find her in the right matchup where you can really utilize your passive, your ability to really nullify certain champions, then she can be really strong. Good A tier pick. Quinn. Honestly, surprised we're not seeing a level of Quinn within competitive. I think Quinn mid could genuinely be a pick that like make a value, but then it's a case of people putting the games in. Obviously, Showmaker has put some games into Quinn mid. This would be like the really heavy speed opt into Symbiotic Souls build where you can really easily stack it up, and you're like going for Profane Hydra, playing on your one-shot capability. She's in a pretty good spot at the moment. Definitely a solid AD A tier option. Fizz tends to be a bit more counter pick. He's pretty close to the B tier. He's really good into ASO, who is once again really strong this patch. He is being nerfed next patch. He's overperforming. Fizz will also really benefit from Storm Massage, gaining a bit more movement speed on the active, when you proc it. He does really value that item. That was something which he was one of the best abusers of when that was really strong. But yeah, if you utilize him as a counter pick, he is in a pretty strong spot at the moment. If you don't, he does fall off a bit, and will probably drop down to the B tier. Aurelia, also going to be my A tier. She got adjusted this patch. It was very neutral. Gained a bit in high elo, lost a bit in low elo, but not enough to really shift her out of the A tier. She's still really strong if you get your items down. Your Borks, your Sundered Skies, Wit's End being buffed next patch is really good for her. Shield Boat is an option, and then you can kind of flex around. Death's Dance is gaining 10 armor. That is also a very nice item on her. She should be in a pretty good spot, combined with the changes she is receiving. Yeah, Aurelia, good A tier pick. Morgana, kind of easy to play, shove wave, and then be able to just output a decent amount of damage. She's kind of like brand light, I guess, if that's what you want to call her. She obviously does have value in Spell Shield. The Q Snare is really powerful if you can have some level of follow-up to it. Brand does output a decent amount more DPS, obviously being able to be more of an AoE multicaster. Morgana is more reliant on setup and a level of control. But she's in a solid spot at the moment. She's a good A tier pick. Nico, also going to be my A tier. She's been kind of forgotten at this point. Like, this champion has really lost a lot of her play rate. Like, she's gone back to almost what she was pre the update, where she could like turn into monsters, and that was where she gained a lot of her power. Combined with like the old changes, like that was really nice for her. But she's still a good lane bully. She doesn't really see competitive at the moment, mainly because like the AD mid laners have pushed out a lot of the options there. But with the nerfs to some of the items, Kraken Slayer, Shiv, I could definitely see the resurgence of Nico. But for the moment, she is in my A tier. She will also benefit from Rocket Belt being buffed. She was one of the core users of that item. Realize I've forgotten two champions here. So Zeri and Cho'Gath are actually going to go in my B tier. Zeri is one of the better ranged mid laners, honestly, at the moment. Like, this pick is in a really good spot, really benefiting from Shiv being pretty good. She just generalistically is pretty good in her current state as well. Can flex between bot, mid, top, scales really well. Isn't particularly bad early game either. Like, she does have a relatively durable level 1. In Cho'Gath's case, this is more just tank Cho'Gath. He's definitely benefited from his buffs, for Q being able to opt it into as a max option, also quite nice into immobile targets. E can allow for a very stat checky playstyle, the damage going up quite heavily on that ability definitely enables that. He is in a pretty solid spot, a good B tier tank. Sam probably also lies about B tier, C tier, but he's not particularly popular, so I haven't really included him. Moving on from Nico, Pantheon is also going to be my A tier. He is a relatively simple to play AD mid laner. If you can really like leverage your harass early on into the game with your Q poke, whether you're running like PTA, Conqueror, Scorch, Mana Flow, that can enable that playstyle a bit more. Other than that, you do have access to like Conditioning Overgrowth as secondary if you're looking to be a bit more durable and like scale a bit better into the game. Your item builds tend to be either Eclipse or Cleaver. Both these items are quite nice on him. Eclipse synergizes well with his kit. Cleaver, now that he's got health ratios, definitely feels quite nice to run on Pantheon. And then you can follow that up with things like Cinder Sky, Shojin, Sterix. All these items are really good on him, and he is in a solid A tier spot. Moving on from Pantheon, we have Vex. Once again, pretty counterpick reliant. You're not really going to pick this champion outside of fairly heavy dash comps, but she has good range, she has good one-shot capability, someone who will really benefit from the Storm Surge being Storm Surge buffs as well. Being a range champion and that being buff for range would definitely help her, and she should move up with that, I imagine, at least to the high end of the A tier, but for the moment she is a solid A tier counterpick option. Sylas is also going my A tier. They are doing, once again, lots of changes towards Sylas in 14.15. But for the moment, he is a very good A tier pick. You tend to just opt into like Electrocute, Lichbane, Rabadon's build, Shadowflame, Rabadon's build, where you're playing very much around your one-shot capability. You can kind of alternate between Q and W max depending on matchup. E is also still a really strong ability. I would kind of recommend picking him in games where you have good ultimates. That's where some of his like variability strength can lie, and he's a solid A tier pick. Echo and Diana, once again, go next to each other. Diana, great early game bully, can really, really push people out of lane with the amount of damage her Q, combined with some of the effects like a Scourge and Electrocute can have. In Echo's case, E-Max, well, not E-Max, God, don't do that. Q-Max alongside E with Halo Blades can be really oppressive to play against, can definitely give him a lot of strength. And yeah, he is also a really solid A tier pick. Once again, both these kind of early game skewed AP assassins. Echo tends to scale a bit better, but they also have really solid objective taking, can poach enemy jungle quite easily. Both very deserving of A tier spots. Akshan, like probably considered the best AD solo Q pick in high elo. For the average player, he kind of drops down a tier from like S/S plus to A tier. Tends to be a bit less reliable, very much reliant on his early game strength. His ult now being a lot better has definitely helped him. His build's still in a pretty standard spot at the moment, and yeah, he's a very solid A tier pick. Victor. Okay, so Victor obviously is still kind of perceived as being a bit kind of like weak, but the pick definitely has benefited from some of the changes like around him. He's benefiting from things like Lichbane at the moment. Items really nice on him. Shadowflame, Rabadon, all these items can be quite good on him. He can be a bit slow to come online in certain situations, but if you do come online and you're able to really leverage the amount of damage and range you have, combined with like some of the other tools you have access to, like the movement speed, the W is a great control ability, the R also great for controlling area. He is a very solid A tier pick, definitely something which kind of goes under the radar at the moment. The other three champs I have in my A tier are Anivia, which is more early game skewed than people give her credit for. You can translate that into like really good mid game team fighting control, but yeah, her early game has a lot of strength. The Q has a lot of range, which people can kind of be took back by, and yeah, she's in a pretty solid A tier spot. The builds tends to be like Roa, I know, but like Archangels tends to be pretty preferable as a second option. I think Malignance can be something you opt into, but I don't remember if that's as core as it used to be. Yeah, she's in a really solid spot at the moment. Vel'Koz's benefited from his from the flat buffs towards his passive not too long ago, alongside some of the items being pretty good on him at the moment. He can opt into more burn heavy builds, he can opt into more burst heavy builds. He's a very solid artillery mage, probably like a step up from Ziggs, but you can kind of like rotate amongst the three. I just recommend Xerath, honestly, as like the best option. He's in a really good spot at the moment, and you're notice that when I talk about him. Swain is the other champion here. I believe Swain is still a great team fighting AP like frontline mage option. He's really unique in the class he kind of fills, being this drain tank along running items along like Blackfire, Malignance, Rylai, Zonya, stuff like that can all really synergize really quite nicely on him. Gives him great AoE team fighting damage. If he can maintain ult uptime, then he can be really impressive. Ghost being nerfed did hurt him quite a bit, but you still really value it as a summoner spell. It allows you to stick to people and output the damage which you have. Moving on to the S tier, so we have a couple of champions here. Heimerdinger, still incredibly underrated as a champion across both top lane and mid lane. The build is really good for him at the moment. Combined with the level of control, people not really understanding how to play against the champion, he can definitely be maybe not free LP, but a good way to climb if you do enjoy the play style and you kind of learn how to play as Heimerdinger. Veigar in a really good spot at the moment, tends to be a bit more low elo skewed with some of the changes they made at him, the scaling AP ratios, combined with just the being able to land the cage and like that level of control tends to once again be pretty low skewed, but he's in a good spot at the moment. He's a good S tier option. Garen is my go-to AD option. I really do recommend learning this champion for mid lane. I imagine he will get nerfed at some point, but not in 14.15, so you can still find a level of success on this pick. The other one is Neferi. She's in a really good spot at the moment as she is very low elo bound, but her stat checking nature, her easy to play assassin kit can definitely create unique circumstances which can be quite deceptive for the opponent, especially if they don't understand how to play against it that well. Some of the other picks here, I've got Annie for her simplicity, combined with like the playstyle options. You can make her a burst mage, you can make her like a Tibbers summon bot, really playing around that, like Leandri, Malignance, Rylai, stuff like that can already amp Tibbers strength within fights. She's in a great spot at the moment. Cassiopeia is getting changed in 14.15, but she's still really good at the moment. Her ability to skip boots combined with the almost stat checking nature of like the QE, like if the opponent doesn't have a way of resisting it, then it is very hard for them to play against. She does require a bit of learning, but like if you put in that like curve originally, then you can get a really strong level of power on this pick, and she can really benefit from the items in the game at the moment. Your Roas, your Seraphs, stuff like that all work really nicely on her. She's a great S tier option. Brand, bit weaker after his nerfs. He definitely felt these ones a bit more and has definitely lost a level of his power budget, but he still does great amounts of AoE, very unmovable in laning phase with the mana sustain plus the accessible wave clear he has, his ease of playing, his scaling. There's just a lot of power on this pick, and he maintains a spot within the S tier. Some of the other picks here, we've got Lux. She's really impressive to play against, a really strong burst mage, kind of burst artillery region. Obviously, if you're building items like Malignance, her uncompetitive wave clear, where she can just ult it and one tap, often ult combined with E, one tap frontline and backline minions, can be very hard to ever really siege against this pick. She's also going to be within my S tier, also pretty easy to play. Seraph, my recommended go-to artillery mage, also really benefiting from a lot of the items within the game at the moment, combined with the ult changes he've received back along. Really doing quite well at the moment, a great S tier pick. And we've got 3 champions left. So Malzahar, also going to be on my S tier. Very easy to play, push wave, and then you can roam onto sides, utilize your ultimate. It can be really hard for people who, like mid and low elo, it can be quite hard to play against this pick. He's more counter pick reliant, higher up you go, whether this is into champions which are quite heavily nullified by his ultimate, or champions which really can't play against his oppressive wave clear. That kind of depends on the matchup. And then 2 more champions left, so we have Aesol and Galio, who are my 2 S+ picks. In Galio's case, I'd recommend banning the Fury, and then he practically counters majority of the rest of the roster with his Hollow Radiance Riftmaker build. You can opt into other things like Lichbane, things like Chevaliers. Electrocute tends to be what you run with Lichbane, but you can still run Aftershock. There's options there, and he can really benefit from a lot of the items in the game at the moment, combined with the fact that some other options should be a lot more accessible to him next patch. definitely a great S plus option. In ASO's case, they overcompensated. The nerfs they gave him this patch, so he's ended up being just generalistically too strong. They are nerfing him in 14.15, but if you enjoy ASO and you're good at the pick, he can be considered free LP this patch. I guess he's probably the strongest just generic mid laner at the moment. Obviously, he can be punished the higher up you go. People have a stronger understanding how to play against the champion and weren't abusing so much for Q tap, which he was kind of, which was allowing him to have a bit more viability within high elo. But he's quite strong at the moment. Definitely something I'd recommend. And those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.